Hi, this is Tim Andrews, President and Chief Executive Officer of ASI. Thanks very much for joining us for our panel today. Please welcome David Nicholson, the President of Polyconcept North America, Bill Korowitz, CEO of the Magnet Group, Brandon Mackey, CEO of Snugs, and Mark Seymour, CSO of Next Level Apparel. Let's get right into it. Let's sort of go one at a time, and we're going to try to cover a lot of topics today in the next hour. But for each of the panelists, I'd like to ask, what's the current status of your company's production and operations? You know, are your employees working from home? Are orders still coming in, going out with regularity? Sort of just what's your status update for each of your businesses? David, let's start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Yeah, so it's changed quite a bit in the last 24 hours. I think for anyone that's been following the news, we had both changes in California and Pennsylvania happen late last night. So I can certainly speak to the impact on our Leeds facility and ETS facilities. So let me just quickly run down kind of where we are and what we know, and then speak to kind of what we're waiting to still determine. So in terms of our bullet facility in Miami, that is fully operational from a plant perspective. Employees are working from home. Similarly for Journal Books in Charlotte and Trimark up in Toronto. ETS in California is operational today, but will be closing their facility in California as of the end of today, but will be operational out of their Concord, North Carolina facility starting next week. So really no interruption for customers. We'll just be shifting orders to be fulfilled out of North Carolina. The big unknown for us right now is Pennsylvania. We are waiting for further determination from the governor as to his mandate as to which businesses are included with his measure last night and which will be not be able to be operational. So we do not have a definitive answer. We should be getting that this afternoon, and we'll be getting a communication out to the market by the end of today.
Great, thanks very much, Bill.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me. I never thought being in the middle of nowhere, Missouri, would come in handy until now, and because we're in Washington, Missouri, with most of our facilities, we're business as usual. We haven't seen any effects from a manufacturing point of view. We have seen a slowdown in orders, of course. Monday was a record day for us. Wednesday was a record bad day for us. So there's kind of the 3-day window. South Carolina is in the middle of nowhere, and it seems to be fine as well. So, with all the pain that everyone is experiencing in the world, it hasn't come to our doorstep yet. So thank you.
And Brandon, obviously Snugs does a lot of hand sanitizer and other kinds of personal care items. What's it been like there for the last few weeks, and how is your team holding up, and what's the general business status?
So operationally, we're 100% operational. Office admin staff, I would say up to 90% is operating off-site at this current moment and has been all week. Manufacturing is still taking place on site here. We are a manufacturer of sanitizer. We have been at our rev limiter at capacity for 3 to 4 weeks at this moment. I know it's very frustrating for the industry that we have not additional bandwidth, but that's just the reality of it without any time to prepare. But we've been working nearly around the clock for 4 weeks now. My kids are a distant past right at this moment. In addition to that, we had an earthquake earlier this week. We lost a day's production with that, and if on a scale of 1 to 10, I think our stress load is a solid 12 right now.
Mm-hmm. Mark Seymour from Next Level Apparel.
Wow, that's a tough one to follow. Yours is truly an essential item, and that earthquake doesn't talk about piling on. But so at Next Level, we're fully operational. Most of the staff have been working off-site as other companies for a week. We chose to do that on a layered basis to just put a stress test on the system, and we got through that well. And of course, in California, today will be the last day that will be operational to ship products here in Los Angeles, but we do have a fully functional warehouse with more stock than in LA. We're able to even add some stock to that in Alabama, and so we'll keep that open as long as we're allowed. So right now we're fully open for business and able to, you know, to service the business 100% focused on the customers and for whatever need there is. We, you know, I think our customers and us started to see the change in buying patterns Friday of last week and then Monday, Tuesday of this week. But there's been, as somebody else mentioned, some real highs and lows that are hard to understand at this short window right now. But, you know, we're just going to be prepared to service the business, you know, where it is as much as possible.
Thank you. We're getting a few audience questions already. Maybe someone can jump in on this. You know, this all sort of, the beginning of this was a few weeks ago in China, and it really impacted the factories there. And David, for instance, I know you have people on the ground in China, and others may as well. You know, what are you hearing from the folks that you keep in touch with in China in terms of, are things getting back to normal there? How long did that take? You know, not that we can necessarily say it's going to be the same in the United States, but sort of what's the word from Asia?
Yeah, I would say it's not completely back to full operations and full capacity, but it's pretty close. I think, you know, we track it on a daily, weekly basis. Our folks that are reporting in from the various regions. So we estimate we're at about 75% capacity. All the factories are operational. And I think, you know, more from a social perspective, you know, life does appear to be getting back to normal, like some of the travel restrictions are being lifted. And that's been happening over the last, you know, 2 weeks or so. So if you figure this really started in kind of late January, you're talking about a month period to get back.
Great, thanks. Let's circle back to Brandon. You know, as you're thinking about and as you're serving clients, I know that you do some work for some commercial providers for hand sanitizers and also other items. So what's that current supply demand look like, and how are you sort of deciding how to allocate your production?
Right now, the majority of our backlog or our allocation has been to the promotional product side. I would say, like I'd mentioned when we were prepping for this call, we've had a high number of increased call volume to have us look at doing more hospital healthcare direct type of work. They're in dire need of product, which Governor Cuomo mentioned this morning in his conference. They'll take any sanitizer they can get. From the Canadian side, the same, and even in our local market here, the hospitals are just preparing for something that potentially could get catastrophic, which really puts us in a real quandary of promo, which is our lifeblood, and an ethical quandary of what's socially responsible too. So we're just trying to find additional bandwidth under any stone we can uncover right now.
Great. Bill, you know, you've been in business for a very long time, like many of the people on the call. You know, sort of as you're observing this, and you know, do you think there's a parallel here with anything in the past? Is this a 9/11 parallel? Is this a recession of 2008 parallel? You know, how are you looking at this, and sort of as you're beginning to sort of plan, and even though really we feel helpless in some ways in terms of being able to plan, but how are you looking at it? And I'll be talking to others as well on that topic. So how are you looking at this today?
Well, I think that this is, to say it's unprecedented, to say we don't have any experience with this kind of thing, I think it's putting it mildly. You know, I mean, I've never in my lifetime seen California close, New York, Pennsylvania, as David mentioned. I mean, I've never seen anything like that. I mean, 9/11 was bad, of course. 2009 was bad, of course. This is unprecedented. I mean, you know, it's you do things that you've learned over the years and have been taught to you, you know, in the hopes that they help mitigate some of the things. But I don't think anything prepares us for entire states. I mean, I think someone said on the internet, which of course is true, you know, 59 million people at least were locked down in some form of quarantine. That's a big, big number. And I've never experienced anything like that in my lifetime.
So as you follow what the government's doing so far, do you think that's going to be, short-term helpful, or what's your viewpoint on that? Do you have one?
I know I don't actually. I don't have a viewpoint because, on the one hand, I see people following what the governors are suggesting and staying home, and like a lot of people on this call, I'm sure I'm self-quarantined, right? Then I see pictures of spring breakers on Clearwater Beach in Florida, and it's packed, and I'm thinking, what's going on here? Where's the disconnect? So I hope that the governors take, or whoever, the president takes stronger action faster, so we can get this behind us. I mean, I think the good news is that, as David is saying, I think the thing has moved its way through China and is trying to move out, and I think that provides hope for us. That there will be an end to this thing. But I think that if we don't do the smart things, and that's the difference between the American culture and the Chinese culture. Chinese are very good at doing things like quarantining. You ask your basic American to quarantine, they look at you like you're nuts, right? I know I did. I still do. Do I like working at my kitchen table? I don't. So, you have to factor in all those kinds of things. But I think as quick as we can get this behind us, the better off we'll be, of course. Boy, it's going to take a Herculean effort from a lot of people not on this call.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, you mentioned that you've got another factory in Alabama. How much of your business can you really shift there? And, how did you put plans in place to do that, and how effectively is that going to be working, you think? And of course, none of us can answer about whether that access and whether that fatal shutdown as well, but sort of, how should people be thinking about that in working with Next Level and really with lots of businesses that are converting business from one location to the next?
Yeah, I mean, we're fortunate that we had that second facility. We had done that back at the time when there was the port strike in Long Beach, and didn't want to be caught with that kind of a situation again. So it's really servicing us well here. I'm really proud of the team and the company overall, how they've set up the plan and quickly moved more inventory into place there, and the offsite folks and the connectivity ability to process orders and do what they need to do. I mean, it'll really be tested on Monday when that's the sole facility to ship from. But the alternative to just have California obviously would not be desirable. So we have high expectations that we'll be able to service at a high level to our customers. And we're fortunate that customers are still asking us that want us to do that. So number one, it's that feels good at this kind of environment. But mostly I'm just proud of the individuals of the company. We're very much of a Next Level family, and the way everyone has treated each other and chipped in and worked hard, and the passion for the business and the customers and for each other has been exemplary. And I think that's a part of it that's really been exciting. I think one of the things that's interesting is just that we've all known about this connectivity of technology where we can do meetings remotely, and we can do all kinds of business practices that we do in a different way. And I know coming out of this that our company will probably be further down that path than we would have been without this crisis, and probably adopting a lot of those types of things long term. So I think we'll all be looking at a new world order from a business standpoint, from a social standpoint after all this is done, and hopefully some of that is good for all of us.
Obviously, there's been a lot of disruption in the supply chain because of this hitting in China earlier. I'd like each of you to sort of comment on, what are you hearing in terms of your manufacturers to the extent that you're importing product? What's that look like? Are we going to have shortages of import because we aren't able to bring it into the country? Sort of what's the supply chain looking like right now into the States and into the different warehouses? Let's start with Mark, since we're with you, and then I'll do a little round robin.
Yeah, so a couple things. One is because we work mostly from a finished goods inventory, from a service level, having those goods in Alabama in a deep sense is always been a part of our model, and that's good. We also have an exemplary wholesale distributor network around the country, and to the extent that those places are open, a lot of them have multiple locations. We'll continue to service our customers through them, and that's 90% of our business model anyways. And then from a supply chain side, we've always had a flexible supply chain. We have almost a year's supply of fabric on all the major products. We're still sewing in the countries that we sew in. So today there hasn't been any disruption. Probably the more challenge is how do you prepare to downsize in a way that's for an unpredictable set of demands over the next 60, 90, 120 days, and then how can you be prepared to win on the backside of that and be prepared to ramp back up? Is it a U-shaped ramp? Is it a V-shaped ramp? What does business get like? And some of that will be dependent on how long this lasts and what the inventories look like at those distributors and at our own facility. But we're confident in the near term, we look like we should have plenty of product depending on what the demand is going to be. And then I think we've just modeled all the different options that we think might happen, in the long term. And then we just have to keep adjusting. I mean, it's been remarkable how much it's changed every day, literally daily. You get new information and you make new adjustments.
Great, thank you. Bill, how are you seeing the supply chain that you're dealing with, and how much of your product is made in the States and outside of the U.S.?
We have, having Magnet in Missouri, where where we're pretty self-contained. I mean, we have unlimited inventory, and we do things just in time, and there's nobody that can outsell what we can make. So that's the good news. We probably get about 30% of our stuff from China. We're in very good shape, I would say, until probably the fall. And so if the things begin to ship from China, as we're hopeful, then we shouldn't have any problem. Italy, with our Castelli line, is a little bit of a horse of a different color. I mean, we knew business was growing rapidly, so we ordered early. So we have a lot of inventory that we brought in before the virus hit Italy, and so we're in pretty good shape. But again, I think come this fall, we'd like to see things returning to normal. But for right now, we're fine. From a basic supplier point of view, it's not about supply; it's about getting orders. I think we all can figure out how to get the stuff. I really do, except for Brandon with his, antibacterial stuff. But other than that, I think we're all in pretty good shape.
Yeah, good. So good segue to Brandon. So Brandon, how are you looking at this from a supply perspective and a raw goods and materials perspective? Both, the containers for what you're producing, but also the raw material for what you actually have to create. You've got a very impressive warehouse and factory there. I've been to visit. But sort of how's that looking from a supply chain perspective?
So supply chain on goods outside of sanitizer, I think with the easing, with the relative deploy of employees back to work in Asia, we do have quite a bit of goods that are on the way. To be honest, the majority of our focus right now is being able to source containers that meet our guidelines and that meet our GMP standards. So we just can't go out and buy a container from so-and-so and a cap from so-and-so. We have to make sure that we have the steps and the processes in place to make sure that we have that trail on the product and make sure that it doesn't contradict with the product that we're putting inside of it. So a little more complex for us, but we are working the phones all day, every day right now, trying to find raw materials.
And Brandon, a question from one of the attendees. there's a lot of email floating around from direct China factories that are offering hand sanitizer and masks and all sorts of other things. What would be your concern about doing business with some of those companies, other than sort of my obvious statement, which is buyer beware? But what would your opinion be about that in terms of making sure sanitizer really meets the criteria?
Well, I mean, I guess there's the fact that capitalism never dies, regardless if you're here in America or in China. So everybody's always going to try to make a dollar. I think for us and for the consumer, if that's a path or a pathway that they want to put in front of their customer, their client, that's something that they're going to have to choose for themselves. We have not been successful of sourcing goods that meet our standards out of Asia, that meet our testing standards. So we just continually beef up our domestic operations. And many people would say, well, why didn't you just order more product from China and then you wouldn't be in this situation? And that didn't fit our ethos. And so here we are today. But I can't tell any one person what to do with their business or where to send their orders. All I know is that we focus really highly on the products that we put out the door.
Yep. David, Polyconcept is a global entity. What's your overseas businesses? How are they doing? What are you hearing, especially from Europe, where you have a lot of operations? And what are the steps going on over there to protect the employees and the staff? But also, what's the business intelligence of how things are turning over there?
Yeah, Europe it's really a similar story to kind of what we're seeing here. Obviously, they're a little further along, and countries like Germany and France and Spain, obviously they've gone much further in terms of restrictions. So, from a business standpoint, it's, a very similar, story playing out. And it's something I think, that to Bill's point, this is no longer a supply chain challenge. This is a demand challenge. They're seeing it, and they're probably seeing it earlier and faster than we are, just given the extent of the cases over there. So I think if there's anything to learn, it's, this is going to be a demand challenge for this industry, and very likely a very, serious one, probably potentially worse than, at least near term, what we saw in 2008 and 2009.
So could you share in round numbers sort of what you're seeing from an orders perspective? And I'm going to ask everyone else to do the same. I know that's a somewhat proprietary thing, but you can sort of give a range, or we can say sort of what are you hearing from your supplier friends or whatever. But how much is demand really dropping in the last couple of days?
Yeah, I think we would say, depending on our business unit, anywhere from, if I look at compared to where we would have been last year at this point, and this is literally happened in the last 5 days, we're off anywhere from 40 to 50% of volumes that we would have seen last year, and that's fairly consistent across category and brand. So it's significant, more significant than we saw in 08 and 09, and it's certainly much faster. I mean, it is almost staggering how quickly the business turned off, and that's, Tim, that's before we've seen some of these more serious restrictions coming out of California, Pennsylvania, and now New York.
I mean, those are three huge cities, or three huge states for promo. Texas being another one, Chicago area being another one. Bill, what are you seeing in terms of your order flow? Are the numbers sort of like that you're hearing?
What I agree with everything David said. I think his numbers were about right. I think the only thing I'd add is that this has been a week of, oh my goodness, what's happening kind of thing. And I think as people, as this industry tends to do, as they settle in a little bit more next week and realize that eating and working at their kitchen table isn't a bad thing, we may see some of those orders rebound. We may. My concern is the states closing. To your point, that's a huge thing. But right now, it's David. Would you say demand challenge? I think that's right, and I think the number is about what he said.
Yeah, Jim, I'll give you one really quick example. With California closed, the question for suppliers is, do we even ship orders there? because I'm not sure who's there to actually sign for them. And, you're either stuck with UPS holding them or, so you start to think about the ripple-on effects of these closures. I'm not sure we even fully understand kind of how many implications there are when these states go into these types of lockdowns.
And in terms of that, that's a great point. In terms of the shipping, how are each of the companies supporting distributors? In terms of the kinds of things distributors are trying to do. We're hearing from distributors that they're sort of looking at putting together proposals for their clients that sort of further out in the fall, doing virtuals. Are you still supporting all the kind of marketing activities you typically help a distributor put together, or are you curtailing some of the marketing activities and the support activities that you've got in your organizations because of this very sort of unusual situation we've got on our hands? Let's go back to Mark.
I think we're revisiting all that because you don't have trade shows, you don't have some of the things that you had in your pipeline. The messaging can change a little bit. We've decided to put out a weekly message to our customers that's kind of gives them a consistent message about what Next Level is doing and what's happening week by week. We don't, everybody's busy, so I think I'm getting lots of emails that about what people are doing in their businesses. You don't have time to read them all, so you don't want to write anything long-winded. But in terms of we had some new product that launched this year. We've got new colors. We've got things as much as we can to support our customers being able to monetize what they're doing. We pushed out a discount on Monday. We didn't do that really to think that it was going to move the needle from a stimulus side on the demand side, but whatever transactions our customers were doing, any dollars that we could put back in their pocket, it's hard to know how long this is going to last and what dollar is going to keep an employee there or keep them open. We want those customers to be there at the end of the cycle for sure. So I think the marketing is something that we are rethinking right now. It's been focused a lot around the operation side of what we're doing and the supply chain side and how this new order might affect their ability to get a Next Level product and what the service levels are going to be like. But we expect that to change and to give them tools in this kind of virtual world that we're in to continue to talk and sell the product and to try to carry on with their businesses as much as they can with all the challenges we have.
And Brandon, are you still providing the same level of support, or are you sort of pulling back? And also, obviously your hand sanitizer business is off the charts. But what about the other categories? Are you seeing the same kind of drops that we're seeing that were discussed a little earlier?
Yeah, so the other categories for us are in line with everybody else. I think it's pretty much industry-wide. On the sanitizer side, we've sold all of our quota available until the end of this month. And then the backstocking of rosin, containers, caps that pipeline is going to start to open up again the first part of April for us. And right now we're just constantly fighting to focus on trying to get this backlog out the door and try to get people the product in their hands. This is incredibly uncharacteristic for Snugs, and for any of those who are listening that have tried to get a hold of us, we apologize profusely, but this is a wave that you cannot prepare for.
And how are you going to be doing? I know there's so much breaking activity going on, breaking news activity. I mean, the closure of these states, David's point about do you ship or don't you ship, are you going to continue to be shipping to those states, or have you given that any thought? And I want to circle back to Bill and others on that as well, because I think it's a really good point that I hadn't heard anyone really voice before today.
Yes, for us, until we hear otherwise, we do our best to get the product to ship. Do we need to change our focus and pre-qualify ship to addresses? That is definitely something that I'll take back to our team. Nobody wants to get stuck holding the bag, right? And we don't want to just ship products so we can bill people and blame it that now it's in their possession. So yeah, there's good points that we need to look into further.
Well, certainly in Pennsylvania, and I'll come back to David on this, but in Pennsylvania, I just checked, and the UPS and other kinds of companies are all able to still, they're exempt from they're exempt from the governor's orders. So would you still be shipping in that case, you think? Or do you think that you're concerned that, you have some things that require signature, or what are the issues around that?
Yeah, I think the question is, if you ship to Pennsylvania for something that's to be delivered Monday or Tuesday, 80% of the business, no one's going to be there to take the package. So UPS can probably get it there. Where are they going to leave it? Right? And that's going to be the case in New York soon, after this weekend, and certainly California. And listen, there are going to be a host of other states that follow very quickly.
So if you got distributors that are in that situation, I know you don't want 1,000 phone calls, but if distributors, want to reach out, and initially for everybody, how should distributors be reaching out to you all most effectively now, given the staffing situations, given that you've got people remote? What's the best way for distributors to reach out, and when should they be reaching out to you guys about orders they have? Let's stick with David, and then we'll go around.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think it probably falls to both the distributor to take a look and make sure they don't have, and this is happening real time, so you got to kind of be looking daily. Do you have shipments going to states that are impacted? And then listen, it's also on the suppliers now starting to check for states that are now on the list, restricted lists. Hopefully trying to pre-qualify those with the distributors. It's, I think, got to be both sides trying to figure this out.
Bill?
Yes. Well, heck, I don't know. The news, by the time we get done with this call, will have changed. By Monday, different states will be doing different things. But the only thing I can suggest is that call your customer service person and be patient. If it takes a moment to get back to you, it takes a moment to get back to you. And other than that, they know, our people know, all of us on the phone, I'm sure, have customer service people that know what to do. They just need a little bit of time to get back to people with the right stuff. And that's what I would suggest. Don't panic. Be respectful. We'll figure it out together.
Great. We've gotten a number of questions from people who are saying, suppliers and distributors are both on this call, and a number of people are asking about how are you planning, and I don't want to put anybody too much on the spot on this, but how are you planning about your staffing? Because some of the suppliers on the call are saying, how should I be looking at my hourly employees and my staffing, and sort of how do you think about it? So while I'm not asking anyone to talk about what their plans really are, how do you in this kind of environment, how do you process that thought and that consideration, and how are each of you sort of starting to think about that? Obviously none of us want to be in this position, but sort of how are you starting to think about that internally, and how would you advise other people to think about that? Maybe I'll ask Mark to go first.
Okay. I think that's been one of the biggest challenges. I think that, one of the first things we did was with our outside sales team was, they were all at home and their jobs, kind of changed a little bit. They were doing more customer service support and outreach to customers. We run fairly lean across most of our departments anyways, but obviously things like warehouse workers and that sort of thing, if, in California now, we're going to have to figure out what the new status is. I mean, I think comments that have made before is that by the time we get off this phone call, there'll be 3 more changes that we'll all have to react to. Obviously, the HR departments are extremely busy, trying to make sure that you're staying, within the law and all things that you're doing. But, for us at Next Level, we're very much a family in terms of our employees, and we're trying to do what's right by keeping our service levels high, and where demand is dropped, or for ability to do a job based on them not being here physically at Next Level changes, then finding a way to to keep them available for when we start the business back up, and this kind of play to win mentality, and to be prepared for the the back end of this crisis. But because none of us know how that's going to proceed, or how long that's going to take, or what that demand cycle is going to look like, it's extremely difficult to predict how to do that. So we're just trying to make good decisions based on what we know today, and take care of our Next Level family as much as we can.
Brandon, how are you looking at this? Obviously, you've got a different situation there. You've got people that are working, many hours a day, but how are you thinking about the other areas of the business and staffing, and how do you suggest that others start start looking at their own businesses, distributors and suppliers?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we're just working hard to get everything out the door that we can get out the door possibly right now. The state-to-state closure stuff really concerns us. We have conversations where we want all of our employees to make good conscious decisions right now. We want them to be able to make as much money as they can right now and prepare for what things they need. And I think as a staff, we'll have to look hard at ourselves in the very short future and even myself and say, hey, it looks like it's time for some of us to furlough some of our pay and look out for the best interests of our people.
Tough decisions. David, how are you processing that kind of, conversation, and what kind of advice would you give to distributors and suppliers to think about their own businesses and how they make some of those very tough decisions in the days and weeks ahead?
Yeah, I think, listen, to Bill's point, we've been through this a few times as an industry. I think what we've learned, as you go through these challenging times, one is you really can't, it's really hard to predict the future. And I think this is a really, really challenging situation to predict what the world's going to look like in a month from now. So what we're focusing on is, first and foremost, communication, and really transparent communication in terms of incoming volumes with everyone. People need to know, and they need to know the honest truth in business. And the second, I think Brandon's right. The idea of this is going to require a shared sacrifice, and that's from everyone. And it's going to require some tough decisions. I think from our perspective, before is the faster you can make those decisions, the better. And I think in this case, our advice, at least the way we're looking at making those decisions, probably better to go deeper, faster than what you think is required. Kind of the way this is starting to play out.
Thanks. Bill, how are you thinking about this? Obviously, you're in locations that haven't been affected yet, but you've got the demand side that's really a big impact. So how are you, going to be looking at this, and how would you advise other people to be thinking about it?
Well, I think David said at the very end, I think, if you're a leader in these times, you have to be fast, you have to be decisive, and you have to go deeper than you think. And it's tough when you're, I'm a sales guy at heart. I've been a sales guy for 40 years, and it's tough for me to do these kinds of things, but I think you have to be prepared. And I think if there's anything we learned in 2009 is that you have to go more than you think, because you can always come back. It's really hard to go easily into something and then go, oh, wait a minute, you have to go a little bit deeper. And you may not have the cash on hand to go deeper at that point. So I think he's right. Fast, deeper than you would normally go, and hope to recover quicker. I think that's the key. If you're a distributor or a supplier, both, I think you have to use this as a time to be decisive.
So we're an industry of 3,000 plus suppliers and 20,000 plus distributor firms. That's today. As we sort of look forward, maybe we'll take these one at a time, or however you want to answer. But sort of, in your view, Bill, we'll start with you. What's your view of the financial stability coming into all this before anything else happened, of sort of that supplier network, especially on the supplier side? Their ability and the ability of those 3,000 suppliers to really take this kind of a downturn.
Say it again. You broke up.
Sure.
Say it again.
Sorry, absolutely. So there's about 3,000 suppliers in the network and about 20,000 plus distributor firms. As you look at before we got into this situation, what's your thought about how financially stable or able to sort of withstand this kind of a gut punch, are a lot of those suppliers? And, as we come out of this, and we certainly will come out of it at some point, what do you think that supplier network's going to look like? Is it going to be the same suppliers and the same 3,000? Do you think that if this goes on for 30 or 60 days at 50% or 60% down from an order perspective, what's that supplier network look like, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months after after we're back to whatever normal is going to be?
I appreciate you asking me to go first on that, Tim. I really do. Um, I think that, well, I've always said, I really think that the times favor bigger suppliers. And I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong. I just think it's kind of how it is. And if you look, the top 40 suppliers in our business have gotten bigger, and I have a bad feeling that might be a continuing trend. I would certainly rather be in the position we're in than to be a small supplier at this moment. And you know, there's so many things that go into it. How much cash do you have? How much cash do you need? You know, all those kinds of things. It's a really tough spot to be in. But I would advise anybody that's in business today, hang on to your cash. Do whatever you can, hang on to your cash. Pay us, of course, but hang on to your cash otherwise. You know, it's cash is king. So,
David, what's your view of what things will look like, you know, 60 days, 90 days after we're back to whatever that new normal is, given that this could take, you know, 30 or 60 days of really a tough time in the industry and really in the United States and the world?
Yeah, and I guess level set, you know, our perspective, this isn't a 30 or 60 day issue, not now, you know, so I think the hope of this coming back in 30 days and returning to normal is, I don't see how that's possible at this stage. So I think everyone needs to reset their expectations.
So is that 3 months, 4 months? What's none of us know the timeline, but what would be your best estimate, or your maybe what would be the best outcome in terms of timing? You think is we looking at 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, longer?
I think, you know, I'll give you our at least a reasonable optimistic view, which would be, listen, you know, this is going to be with us, you know, I think in terms of the social and economic impact and the restrictions at a minimum, probably through May, through the middle of the second quarter. You know, so I think you're going to have a depressed Q3 GDP. You know, do we start to see some recovery in the fourth quarter? Yeah, hopefully, and that's if everything goes well. So that's, I think, how we're thinking about the business and planning. And I think that's still, you know, that's hopefully a realistic case and probably on the little bit of the optimistic side. You know, what this looks like and how this reshapes the industry, I honestly don't know. I think that's a really tough question. I think, you know, what you can say is that this has been a really resilient industry. You know, I think the idea that are things going to change, yes. You know, but I would say this is an industry that, you know, it will come back. It may take a little while, it will come back, and we've been through equally challenging times. And it's, you know, it's not going to change the nature of promotional products. At least that I wouldn't see it that way.
And you know, in the 08 recession, the industry's sales dropped about 20%. But since then, we've been growing at about twice the GDP. So we are, as you said, a very resilient industry. We come back, we're filled with entrepreneurs who really look for business. We have a great return on investment for the marketing dollars that our customers spend. So I agree with you. I think it's going to be a very tough few months. But I think that the folks that are in the front line on the distributor side will really, you know, be great at coming back. Brandon, you know, how do you see the supplier network sort of changing as a result of this, from a financial perspective, but also sort of what's the makeup of the supplier network look like in a year?
Yeah, so, you know, the unfortunate thing is that both on the supplier side and the distributor side, there's going to be an issue where some people just don't come back. Like you see on the restaurant side, where a lot of restaurants just won't be able to weather this. They just won't come back. There will probably be the same scope and shape here in the promo industry, but as David said, you know, and I agree with him, and I agree with you. These are some of the most resilient, forward-thinking people that I could ever imagine to be able to associate with. And our distributor partners are beyond brilliant. And the day when the logjam thaws here and the ice gives us a little bit of passage to the future, I think they'll be the they'll be our saving grace. We need them to get out there and get out there pushing products because our products work, and it's going to be a rough few months, but we can't sugarcoat it, and we need to make sure that we're prepared both financially and mentally to weather this. And there's great leaders on this call, and there's great leaders in this industry that will help champion us into a new era.
I think your point about the ability for us to stay focused and stay healthy mentally is really important. Mark, as you're thinking about your staff, what are you doing, or what are you telling your staff to do to sort of stay healthy? And what would your advice be to people on the call as we sort of wrap up the call? What's your advice for people that are listening in, as a distributor or a supplier, as they're looking at, 30, 40% drops in their orders, and nobody answering phone calls when they're trying to get people on the phone? Sort of, how are you keeping your people, upbeat and positive? Because we will come out of this. It's a matter of when, not if.
First of all, just to kind of chime in on what some of the other folks have said about the resiliency and the entrepreneurship of our industry. I think that's always been our strength. And through other crises that we've been through, this may be the biggest challenge ever, but we've always found a way to come out. It's a different landscape, but those that come out of it come out stronger. I think that's a consistent look that we've all had. There's certain things that are going to forever be different. I've got a college student who's home, or just came home yesterday from Santa Cruz, and she'll be doing university from home. But I think that may hit college campus life may be different even after this is over, because some things will be discovered about what can and can't be done. And I think in all aspects of all walks of life, that's going to be true, and some of that's going to be for the better. We've been trying to figure out how to reduce a carbon footprint, in the world for some time, and certainly that's going to happen here in the near term. And maybe some of the things that we learn from this will help us to be better about that, going forward. And some of those things will stick. We'll use technology better and deal with the way we interact, differently. But in terms of our personnel, I think fortunate at Next Level that there's always been a close family knit. I've seen so many examples of how individually they've stepped up, both in terms of the call for the company and the customers, but for each other. And I think that's as a society, beyond just the business things we're talking about, that's what's important. It's tough times show your character. We're all going to do business together afterwards, and everybody's going to remember how we acted during these times, and hopefully this kinds of crisis shows all of the world our better selves, and that's what's gonna get us through this. I think the hardest thing for us is just not knowing, as people said, is this a 2 month, a 3 month, a 4 month? How long does this go on? And that puts pressure on our customers. What we know about T-shirts is that it's the most. I've been amazed, in T-shirt business over 30 years, is the ability for T-shirts to come back and find a way to fit back into whatever's going on in society and be important again as quickly as possible is really a science that just amazes me. So I expect that to happen, and we want to try to keep as many of our customers safe and healthy and able to use the product and have that fit into their ability to be there on the back end, and then support them strongly through the backside of all of this.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. David, your advice, and also a question from someone who's listening in, or there's a little interest in are suppliers creating any sort of special products that can be used specifically for people that are working from home? Obviously, our industry is not the only industry with people working from home. So are you looking from a marketing perspective and a packaging perspective, delivery perspective, at sort of unique ways to serve this new model of distributors selling to clients who aren't able maybe to hand their product to somebody, but are looking to sort of get it in their hands in their homes? So really two very different questions, but one's advice in terms of the business, and then secondly, more tactical, how are you looking at sort of how your product suite is set up and how you're marketing to distributors?
Yeah, I'll go in reverse order. I think one of the things that all of us as an industry, what this is going to require, because there is business still out there, and it will come back, and it's going to come back kind of in fits and starts. But it is going to require us to look in different ways and market differently and think differently about the applications of our products. And so we've definitely I've been thinking about that. We put up a microsite last week very quickly to focus on trends and applications of products that we think are relevant still today, and obviously work from home being one of those. Health and wellness is still really important. The healthcare segment is still probably a really important segment right now as you think about the first responders and all the doctors and nurses on the front line, and our ability to recognize and use our products to recognize their efforts. So we're definitely thinking that way, and I think we'll continue to do so, and we'll continue to drive both our marketing and product development to support that. And I guess, Tim, the question, I don't know whether they were looking for general advice or around kind of sales and marketing, but was there a specific area around the question for advice?
I think it was really advice about that, and also another question that I think would be great to hit, and we'll sort of go around and we'll sort of wrap with this question, which is, what are each of you doing with your own teams to stay engaged with them? Is it video? Is it audio? Are you doing weekly chats? Sort of how are each of you, and I know this is the beginning of what could be a long period, but what are each of you adopting? Because a lot of the companies that are listening in are really interested, I think, in emulating what you all are already doing. So, what kind of things are you putting in place or starting to put in place to work with, your staff that are now working at home and maybe unusually so?
So I can certainly start. I think what we've done, nothing revolutionary, but I think it's been really helpful, is we just have every day a standing time on the calendar to have our leadership call in. It keeps everyone connected. Obviously, with things changing pretty rapidly, it's a way to get everyone on the same page in terms of what's happening. So that's, I think, one recommendation. I think the other is just general communication. We are sharing probably fivefold the level of information and frequency than we would have been, a week ago or 2 weeks ago. And that just, with everyone kind of scattered in different locations, it's really helpful just so people feel connected with what's going on, because you miss that informal opportunity, to pass people in the hallways. So, we're just oversharing at this point.
Yeah, we're doing the same thing at ASI. We've actually, we're using video for everything. So all of our meetings, all of our one-on-ones, everything is through video, and there's obviously Zoom and all sorts of different applications. We happen to be using Microsoft Teams. Bill, what are you doing to stay connected with your teams and get your teams to be connected with their managers so that everyone, has a really good connectivity and feels positive going into this very difficult facing a difficult situation here?
Tim, I had an old CEO, and he used to say to us as leaders at the time, he would say, "You know what? Act like a leader." And we were like, "Oh, what does that mean?" Well, what it meant to him, and what I've learned from that, is that if you know something, then decide on it. If you don't know something, say to the person, "Hey, I don't know. I'll find out what I can, and the rest we just won't know until we know it," right? And by using that, it's real simple stuff, I know, but it seems to put people more at ease. If the leader knows, they'll tell us. If they don't know, they won't tell us. As simple as that. And I think everybody will stay on the same page and be more amenable to what you do have to say, because they'll take it more factually. And I think that the final thing I think our company is very good at is that we back up our managers that we have in place. If we have Danny Jelinek and as executive VP, and he's our product buyer as well, if he says something, we have to back him up. The same with our GMs and the factories. And I think that that's very important, that there's a clear line of communication. Everybody knows what they're doing, and everybody is consistent in that. And I think inconsistency will kill you. When people ask me, "Will this thing last for a couple of months?" How do I know? And they kind of respect that answer. They go, "Oh, he doesn't know. Okay, good. Let's move on." And I think that's the way we have to handle things. If you know something, do it and be decisive. If you don't, say you don't and move on.
Really,
that's the way.
Honesty, transparency, the kind of skills that are and traits are important, really, day in, day out, no matter what's going on. Brandon, what are you doing to stay connected? Obviously your team is there and working. You got other people at home that are working from home. but your factories are working full blast. So how are you sort of managing that yourself, and how's your team managing that to stay connected, to stay positive, and also to be rested enough for the ones that are working so hard?
Yeah, so as a matter of fact, like all of you, we use services like we're using today. We use Zoom or GoToMeeting for our standing kind of our executive team meeting throughout the day. We have some that are working at home, some are here, but to be completely honest, it's all hands on deck for us, and I can package and label and count product, and a good chunk of my day has been there. So I'm right there in the mix with it. It's a crazy world we live in, but I can guarantee you we have some amazing frontline people here, and they'll be the last boots to leave the building, and in the event that we get shut down for any reason, and the first ones here if we get going live again. Amazing dedicated talent, and in times like these, it's just you almost tear up, and just to see the dedication and the love that people here have for one another, and wanting to do what's right. So I'm right in the mix, man. As soon as we hang up from this, I'll go back to combat.
So thank you very much. And so Mark, how are you handling the internal? And also, second question really for you and for anybody else who wants to jump it off, we're wrapping up. How are you keeping in touch with customers and social media and other ways? So two questions really for you, Mark. How are you dealing with the internal communication, and what are you doing to keep people excited and enthused? And secondly, how are you keeping in touch with customers, and how would you suggest that distributors and suppliers do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting if you look at it from a sales side. I mean, sales is always, they're scattered across the country and for us internationally, and they found ways to stay connected, and so there's lots of tools there. So we've used a lot of what was there for the sales connectivity for other departments in the company that are now working remotely, and that wasn't normal for them, and that's helped. And I mean, I think the technology that's out there today, even some of the stuff in the last week that we've discovered that we don't use as much, are going to stick with us as a company. And you can choose different tools. There's great toolbox out there for what people want to do. I think somebody had mentioned about doing the regular, standing meetings. I think those are really important, and we've put those in place, and everybody knows that there's a check-in time, and the comments about the decisiveness. If you know something and can make a decision, do it. If you don't, it's okay to say that in these kinds of times. And I think that's really important. Leadership is probably more important now than it ever was, because people want to know that someone's making good decisions based on today's information, and that's going to serve us all well. I think we're trying to stay as close to our customers as we can. So that's our wholesale distributor partners, where most of the product goes through. And we've got, if you already have strong relationships, then that gets you through this kind of a setting as well. And then we're doing a lot more outreach directly to our customers and keeping connected with them. And that's what the salespeople have been doing, and that's proactive. And a lot of times they're calling a customer that's just saying, look, thanks for checking in. We're super busy right now. And then you're just following up, with where we are as a company and how we can support them, and if there's any nuances or changes there. But over communicate, a clear message is really important right now. And then we're just all going to have to adapt as we go, and that's gonna be the key.
Thanks very much. I certainly invite anyone who's on the webinar today to connect with ASI on Facebook, Advertising Specialty Institute. Find us and like us. We have a lot of information there posted to help distributors, suppliers through this very difficult time, to help with their business, help with communication internally, and also to all the latest news is on the web from in the industry about what's going on. Lots of good case studies of what people are really having success with right now, and that's really important, I think, for people to see. And also connect with me on Twitter, and also my email address is tim.andrews@asicentral.com. We're here to help and with you every step of the way. I really want to thank David Nicholson of Polyconcept, Bill Korowitz of the Magnet Group, Brandon Mackey of Snugs, Mark Seymour of Next Level Apparel for joining us today with this really informative panel and discussion. And thank you all very much for joining us over your lunch hour. And we'll be back next Wednesday with a webinar with 4 distributors, top distributors in the industry, top 40, and talking about sort of where are we next Wednesday and what are distributors doing to prepare for the comeback. So thanks very much for joining, and take care and have a good rest of your weekend.
Thanks for putting this together, Tim. Very important.